over 120 people have signed on to be with us this morning. And by the way, we will have a breakfast on June 25th with the Alexandria City Council, very similar to this. But our main sponsor is Virginia Tech. They've been sponsoring our government relations work. And this person really needs no introduction, but welcoming you is Dr. Tim Sands, President of Virginia Tech. Dr. Sands.
Thanks, Joe. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well in these challenging times. It's a pleasure to be with you virtually this morning. Virginia Tech is honored to serve as the presenting sponsor for the Chamber's 2020 Public Policy Series. You know, we entered 2020 in the General Assembly session with many historic firsts and plans for a number of significant investments and new initiatives. And we saw significant investments in our K-12 system, infrastructure, we saw bipartisan support for research, including the Commonwealth Cyber Initiative, and a number of other bills intended to improve the lives of Virginians and strengthen our economy. And then, of course, COVID-19 happened, and our elected leaders were required to make some really difficult decisions in this unprecedented environment. Several of the initiatives they championed had to be shelved and will hopefully be invested in or revisited in the near future. Discussions such as the one we're having today are extremely important. I want to thank our Alexandria delegation for making time to be with us today. Like all of you, Virginia Tech has been rapidly adapting to meet the challenges of COVID-19 across all the communities we serve in the Commonwealth. Despite the immense disruption, I continue to be amazed by our students, faculty, staff, alumni, and our community members for their resilience, their ingenuity, and their acts of service over the past 8 weeks. It's an extraordinary time. We're understanding community resilience and individual resilience, but the way that people are stepping up is extraordinary. I don't think we could have predicted that. Our plans for the Innovation Campus in Alexandria continue to move forward on schedule. Our team works remotely with all of our partners, and the City of Alexandria has been a great partner. We've been able to really make the process move along without missing a step. Of course, we're getting a lot of questions about our plans for the fall at Virginia Tech, and it's a decision we're considering carefully. I'd like to commend the governor and our statewide officials for their thoughtful approach to addressing the pandemic. While some of our communities are beginning to reopen, others, including Alexandria, still face considerable challenges, as you know. Virginia Tech has a presence in every city and county in the Commonwealth, so we have to take every region into account as we think about the fall. My team and I continue to monitor the situation closely, and we're aiming to make a decision in early June as to how we will conduct the fall semester. I don't think it'll be a surprise. Anybody who's paying attention to what's going on in higher ed is seeing a convergence rather than a divergence in approaches to the fall. We're all doing our best to guesstimate where we're going to be in August and what the conditions will be. But one thing we've learned, we have to be flexible, and we have to be agile. I certainly look forward to the day when we can meet again in person and have the scrambled eggs and bacon, things I don't eat normally, but enjoy sharing with you. But until then, Virginia Tech remains focused on our mission of service, and we're ready and willing to help out wherever we can. So thanks again to Joe and to the Chamber for providing this opportunity for really important discussion this morning. Thank you, Joe.
Dr. Sands, thank you so much. And we really appreciate David Baker and the work he's doing here. He's also a member of the Chamber Board of Directors. So we are not eating the hotel breakfast this morning, but I normally would introduce a few sponsors at this time, so I'd like to do that. So first, we want to thank Virginia Tech again for being involved with all of our government relations work. Our other sponsors include Transurban, Dominion Energy, AT&T, Kinnaman Insurance, and the Northern Virginia Association of Realtors. They're all on this webinar, and we thank you all for your support. We also have some local elected officials. Vice Mayor Elizabeth Bennett Parker from the City Council is on, Councilmember John Chapman, and also Councilwoman Del Pepper. We welcome them from our City Council. Just a few of the Chamber's past leaders who chair the Chamber Board. Elizabeth Moon is on from Focus Data Solutions, Charlotte Hall, Old Town Business, Jen Kinnaman, Kinnaman Insurance, and John Renner from Renner and Company. From the Chamber Board, we have almost all of our board members and executive committee, but Dave Millard is our 2020 board chair, and he's also with us. So,
Good morning.
so thank you for all the board member support. With over 120, this is about the same size as we have when we have our breakfast at the hotel. Just as we begin, I want to remind you that you can put your questions into the chat box, and we will take as many as we can. And now I want to introduce Brent McKenzie, Government Relations and Community Outreach Manager at Transurban, to introduce our moderator, Ann Harbour. Brent?
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you today. At Transurban, we specialize in connecting Northern Virginians to what matters most to them. Whether that's getting you home for the family dinner, to work for the big board meeting, or getting you to the softball field for the championship game, the 495, 95, and 395 express lanes get you there faster, safer, and more reliably. Right now, getting you there faster probably isn't your top priority, but safety has never been more important than it is today. For Transurban, safety is always top of mind. It's why we joined the Drive Smart Virginia Coalition earlier this year to push for vital legislation that will make our roads safer, combating distracted driving, and mandating that people wear seatbelts when they're in their vehicles. We really want to thank the Alexandria delegation to the General Assembly for their support for these pieces of legislation. The distracted driving legislation was successful. We're really excited to see that be implemented later this year. And we'll be back next year to push for the seatbelt legislation. We know these things will save lives. Today, a discussion about safety sounds a little bit different than it did just a few months ago. Transurban is doing its part to support the community during this time of crisis. Our small but dedicated operations team continues to keep the express lanes open for those essential trips. Our construction team and our partners continue to work in the field to deliver critical infrastructure projects on time and on budget. Now, I know there were fewer people out on the road, but that's no reason for you to try and see how fast your car can go. When you're out there driving, please slow down. There are a lot of folks out there doing important work who want to go home to their families at the end of the day. Please slow down while you're out there. Transurban is, the rest of our staff is working from home, much like everybody else, working to find new initiatives to improve our customer experience and to support our customers and community during this time of crisis. We thank the Alexandria Chamber for their support earlier this month, helping us raise over $50,000 for the Northern Virginia Family Services COVID-19 response. In the days and weeks ahead, we'll be making additional announcements about how we're supporting our customers and our community. Certainly a tough time right now, but together we'll come out of this stronger. We look forward to brighter roads ahead. Now it's my pleasure to introduce my good friend, Ann Harbour, Chairwoman of the Chamber's Government Relations Committee. Ann is Director of Government Affairs and Local Engagement for Care First Blue Cross Blue Shield. Prior to joining Care First, Ann was Director of Government and Community Relations for Inova Health System. Ann is truly one of Alexandria's best. She currently serves on several local boards and commissions, including the Board of Directors of the Center for Alexandria's Children, Chair of the Alexandria Public Health Advisory Board, Chair of the Advisory Board of the Governor's Health Science Academy at T.C. Williams, the Good Shepherd Housing's Community Leadership Council, and the Sorensen Institute Northern Virginia Regional Board. Ann was selected as a 40 Under 40 award recipient by the Alexandria Chamber of Commerce in 2016 and chaired the event the following year. Ann and her two children live in Alexandria's West End. All of us in Alexandria are looking forward to what's next for Ann. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent, for your kind words. Welcome, everyone. As Brent said, I'm Ann Harbour, and I have the privilege of chairing the Government Relations Committee this year for the Alexandria Chamber. The Government Relations Committee is a diverse group of leaders who are actively supporting our efforts to shape public policy in the Commonwealth and the city of Alexandria. Joining us today from our General Assembly delegation, I'm going to quickly introduce you all, and then we'll move right into questions. But joining us is Delegate Charnel Herring, Majority Leader for the Virginia House of Delegates, Senator Dick Saslaw, Senate Majority Leader, Senator George Barker, Senator Adam Eben, and Delegate Mark Levine. We really appreciate all you giving us some of your time this morning, and we're going to go right into questions because I know we have a lot of active members who would like to ask a few questions on the back end of our formal presentation. The first question we have for you all is, the COVID-19 pandemic has challenged our thinking of collective obligations in protecting the physical and economic health of our communities. As everyone tries to find a balance between protecting the health of Virginians and allowing businesses to reopen, what do you see as the top 3 priorities for the Commonwealth over the next 3 to 5 months? And to start, we're going to pose that question to Senator Saslaw.
Well, we're going to first have to regain the confidence of the public that they'll be safe. This is not going to be a recovery like you would normally have from a regular recession. People are obviously, from what we're seeing, are going to be a little apprehensive about going out to their house and engaging in retail activity. So we're going to have to get their confidence. We're going to also have to know, they're going to have to know that the businesses are taking precautions to make sure that they are safe when they visit them. Once they do that, we're going to have to then, the state's going to have to start providing, working with them to provide marketing and economic development tools so that businesses can revamp, essentially the way they do businesses. Long term, obviously we're going to have to figure out how to stimulate the economy in a coordinated method with the business community in order to make this whole thing work. We're going to have to involve both the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, the Department of Housing and Community Development, to essentially to implement this and to make this work. Those are the things that we're going to have to do. I mean, we do have, the state is, and along with the federal government, providing various, forms of aid, and we can get into that later. But without the confidence of the public that they're going into a safe environment, we're going to have a major problem on our hands.
Thank you, Senator. Delegate Herring.
And thank you, Ann. And I'd first like to thank the Chamber for doing this. And I guess this is our first year with the House and Senate delegation on their own doing this, and I appreciate the additional time. I do want to just 3 things that was asked that are important, and I totally agree with the Senator, is gaining the public's confidence, and public safety is the first thing. And to that end is making sure our state needs to make sure that PPEs are available for businesses when they're starting to open. Certainly workers need to be safe, as well as people who visit the establishments. Virginia does have loan programs for businesses that are starting to revamp and looking to open, and that's the other thing, is to make sure that we're having the resources there to fund them. And honestly, we're going to have to make some decisions once we get the reforecast of the budget about making sure that we're allowing businesses the best opportunity to open. And also that includes just administratively, our state has to be responsive. I know I've heard about some complaints about people just being able to get through to a line just to talk to a human being. Not everyone has high capacity internet and able to access everything online. So we need to make sure statewide that we are having an infrastructure and staff available to help individuals. And in fact, there is the governor, and I'm glad he did, is launch regional workforce teams when it comes to our businesses reopening, so that there are basically an aggregation of support in each region. The other thing I would like to address, though, is the issue of stores. And I mean, thankfully, some stores were able to remain open, but there typically are large retail box stores like Walmart. And my concern is that the smaller businesses have taken such a huge impact, and we're seeing businesses announcing that they're not going to even be able to open back up again. So to that end, and that's why I mentioned that loan program, I think we're going to have to definitely make a concerted effort to spread the word that there are resources, or the state is trying to provide resources for people. And so this is a very unusual time, and never did I think we would be in a situation like this. And so our true test going forward is how we handle this. We had the blessing of such a large financials and budget, or budget that we passed this year was huge, and we thought we would be able to do a lot of things, and certainly we're not going to be able to. First, and the priority is reinvigorating our economy so we can get started again. Thanks.
Thank you, Delegate Herring. Senator Barkley.
Yes, well, welcome everybody. Glad to be able to be with you again this year. And my drive was short this year, a little shorter than usual. There are a number of things that I think that are very positive that are happening already, but there are some challenges that we do have. And I think one of the issues that we have is that we have to, in effect, get the spread of the virus under control before we do widespread reopening of everything. Because otherwise, if we don't do that, we're likely to have a second wave of large numbers of people getting infected. Right now, Northern Virginia, from Arlington and Alexandria out through Loudoun and Prince William, constitutes about 29% of Virginia's population. But we are well over half of all the deaths that have occurred, as well as the number of cases, positive cases of coronavirus, COVID-19. And in recent days, it's actually we've been close to 2/3. So we need to continue to tackle this issue here, specifically in Northern Virginia, to put ourselves in a posture where when we do the reopenings, all phases of that, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, et cetera, that we will have the public on feel confident in coming back out and shopping and doing the other types of things that will continue to boost the economy. Secondly, I think that we do have to continue with our not just helping revive the parts of the economy that have been restricted in the last couple of months, but we also need to continue with an aggressive program of economic development. And one of the encouraging notes that we've gotten already is that those companies from other parts of the country, from within Virginia and also internationally, have been very positive in terms of their situation, how they see Virginia, and have not backed away as a result of what's going on now. So they do expect that they will be able to come here, and it's important that we continue to do that to grow our economy here in Northern Virginia and statewide. And as we all know, Northern Virginia is really the major engine that drives the state economy. So we're going to have to work hard to make sure that we maintain that leadership role there. Finally, I think one of the things that has been referred to a little bit already is the budget. We did pass what I think was widely viewed as a very, very good budget this year. We passed it one day, and by the beginning of the next week, we passed it on a Thursday, and by Monday of the next week, everything had sort of started really happening as it relates to the pandemic there. So we have basically frozen some of the monies that we put in the budget with the hope that we can unfreeze a lot of those when we come back to a special session in August. One of the positive signs, there are a number of positive signs that we're seeing for our economy. We've lost a smaller percentage of jobs than nearly every other state, so we actually are in better shape than most states. We also have a substantial amount of money in our reserve and rainy day funds, so we are in much better shape from our own perspective there for others. And just this past week, we got a report from the Secretary of Finance on the April revenues for Virginia, and they were, from my perspective, amazingly positive. We were down about $700 million total, but that was all in two categories. One is individual income tax, non-withholding monies for people who have to pay other than just having a withholding out of their paycheck, and corporate income tax. And in fact, those two combined amounted to more than the total that we were down. Those two went down because the deadline for both corporate and individual income taxes was pushed back from May 1 to June 1. So it will be interesting to see what happens when we get to May revenues, because a lot of the shortfall we had in those categories, if not all of it, will be up with what we will see with the figures for May when we get into the middle part of June. So we are actually, I think, in a very good posture to be able to restore or unfreeze a lot of the monies that we put in the budget to do a lot of the things that Charnel was talking about that are very, very positive for Virginia and can move us forward.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Eben.
Yeah, I think if I recall correctly, the original question was about the what are our priorities as we balance the health and as public health with businesses reopening.
Yes, sir.
And I would say, in addition to adhering to, overall, we want to make sure that we've got the confidence of not just customers, but also workers, our workforce, to know that they can safely work and also patronize our businesses and restaurants. And then as we make sure that we're adhering to public best health practices, we also want to make sure we've got our robust testing and contact tracing policies that we're ramping up further as we speak, with, I believe it's 1,000 tests to be conducted in Alexandria. I think it's on the 25th. Now, we need to also maintain the continued support of the public, not just in their confidence, but of course some economic support. And I think we're doing the things that we need to do for our long-term stability. I agree with what my colleagues have said. I don't know that there's too much to add. You're lucky you get 5 of us. I don't know that you want 5 versions of the same answer. But if there's anything I'm missing, just let me know. Otherwise, I'll yield.
Okay, thank you so much. Delegate Levine.
Well, I was going to say the top 3 most important things to me are testing, testing, and testing, or if you will, testing, tracing, and transparency. I've been mostly quietly, but sometimes publicly, somewhat critical of the lack of testing in Virginia. And I really think that that is the first hoop we have to go through before we get through anything else afterwards. We have to know what the virus is. We have to trace it. We have to know if people are going to feel confident going out to businesses, they have to feel confident that they're not going to get the virus. So that means that businesses, obviously, whether it's disinfectant or requiring masks, I think I've had many constituents tell me they're not going to go to this particular grocery store or this place again because there were people there without masks and the businesses weren't enforcing it. So, but starting with testing, we are ramping up testing finally, and I think that's a really good thing. As Senator Eben mentioned, Monday, Memorial Day, we can have testing both on the West End and in my district in the Chiricahua area, where we've seen a very serious spike. I think you'll find that the spike in cases in Virginia is mostly or more among the Latinx community than any other community by far. And these are people who are working in the essential jobs, whether it's transportation or grocery stores, and often living all together in, a lot of people in small places, and or taking public transportation. It's very easy to catch the disease if you are struggling and if you're an immigrant. And so, public health, on the one hand, we want to help those who are most struggling, but also public health means that if any community has the disease, it's going to go everywhere. And so we need to do massive testing. I've been actually very much pushing the administration to do testing, particularly in Chiricahua, where the zip code data shows that we have more than 55% positive rate, one of the highest in all of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Unfortunately, is a zip code in my district. So I really been focused very hard on getting them the help they need. Once we test, all we have to do is look at the successful countries, right? Look at South Korea, look at New Zealand, look at Germany, look at Taiwan. Many, many countries, most countries have dealt with this far better than we have in the United States. 4% of the population, 30% of the cases. And they did it through aggressive testing and then contact tracing and finding out who's been exposed to whom, and trying, because I don't know how we can possibly reopen until we know where the disease is and who has it, and making sure that people who have it are quarantined. That includes hotel rooms. Hotels are empty, great, let's use them for people who need to be separated from others. And just really a very aggressive way to find out where the disease is, contact tracing, so that we know we can successfully reopen. And that's what other countries have done. And I really think we have to do the same here. We are doing it. I think we've been a little slow, but we are doing it now. Just this week, as Governor Northam said, we're over 10,000 tests. we need even more. We need to test not just people with symptoms, but people without symptoms. So we know exactly where the disease is. And then for businesses, disinfect, 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 right? Just make sure your customers know that you're actively wiping your counters, that you are requiring a mask, that if people feel safe to go out to your business, they will go to your business as we reopen, but make sure that they feel safe.
Thank you, Delegate. So COVID-19 restrictions have been particularly hard on our small businesses, especially retail, service industries, and minority-owned businesses. The CARES Act passed by the federal government in March provided some relief for those affected, but ran out of money before it could help all who applied. Can you speak to any state-level relief programs that might be on the way for small businesses? And I'm going to pose that first to Delegate Herring, if I can.
And thank you again. You mentioned minority business, so if I could just address that first, and that's unfortunate, symptomatic of just, I think, just our history where the minority businesses and small businesses do tend to take a greater hit, and that's an issue of access to capital. And I think it's very telling when the money runs out. Some of the larger businesses or those that traditionally have had access to capital have gotten their piece of the pie. Again, the Virginia State Business Finance Authority does have programs, loan programs. I mean, I'm hopeful that there will be a focus to smaller businesses, minority-owned businesses. But typically the state does pick up where the federal government has left off, and but this is something that's systematic, and I don't know again how much resources that loan programs will have. But that's something that I encourage our smaller businesses, minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses to look to for resources.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Barker, the same question.
Sure. I think there obviously are some things that Charnel referenced with the loan programs and that kind of stuff that are already in place, and that businesses are able to take advantage of. And I'm sure that many are doing so. What I think we also need to do is to figure out sort of what our other opportunities are from a state perspective, both with some of the state funds that we have. If we continue to have good showing with our revenues and not being in a position to have to make major cuts to the budget a very good budget that we passed back in March, but also with some of the federal monies that are coming through. The CARES Act and one of the previous ones did provide some monies to us, and some of those monies are coming to the state. Some are going to localities such as the city of Alexandria, and that is being done right now on a per capita basis, which helps Alexandria a lot more than some of the other alternatives that have been considered there. So we were successful in getting more money for the city in that respect. But also what we need to do is to be able to see where we can potentially take some of the monies that are coming from the federal government and some that may be coming with the latest bill, the HEROES Act, which passed the Senate, it passed the House of Representatives last Friday, but it's not been considered by the Senate yet. But hopefully there will be significant monies that will come forward to help states, localities, and businesses within local communities, and that we will be able to use some of those monies for support of our businesses at that time.
Thank you. Senator Eben.
Yeah, one thing, it's important to differentiate, or I think you did in your question a bit, that most of the money is coming from the federal government. The state does not have the same kinds of funds, but the Go Virginia, which I know the folks in the call are familiar with, the Go Virginia regional councils have funding where they're taking $1 million per region and directly tied to COVID-19, giving small businesses economic opportunity by getting them into the pipeline. And I'll give you two examples of other regions. In Region 2, I believe it's Region 2, that's Roanoke in Southwest Virginia. They have a community testing program with Virginia Tech partnering to build consumer confidence that I talked of in answer to your previous question. And then Region 3's done something innovative, Danville and Southwest, or Southside, with the drone delivery program. But there are other ideas like bulk procurement of sanitizers and masks for small retailers opening, and other ways people can partner. Region 7 is a pretty large region. It's Alexandria, Fairfax, Falls Church, Manassas, Manassas Park, Arlington, Fairfax, Loudoun, Prince William. And our region can come together and be eligible for funding in that regard. So that's one possibility for state support. The Secretary of Commerce and Trade has a website detailing the Forward Virginia Phase 1 plan on support options, which is has some detail.
Delegate Levine.
So obviously the federal government can print money. We have to balance our budget in Virginia. So a lot of money is coming for the federal government. But I find that one thing we can do in Virginia is actually help people access those funds. We've had a lot of constituents call our office when they've been holding to get their PPP program or to get into the federal program. We've been helping them sort of go through those waters and working with Congressman Beyer to do that. Also, I know that Virginia has staffed up its unemployment lines, the VEC, which deals with federal funding, but it comes through Virginia. And I think it's important to note that it's not your typical unemployment check. In other words, it's the people who are eligible in Virginia because they've been fired by an employer are not the only ones that get it. We also get self-employed. That's a lot of small businesses, right? Gig workers and so forth. They can have access to funds they never could before. Virginia built a whole new system to take care of folks who are self-employed or independent contractors, people who ordinarily would not have access to these funds. So we want to let businesses know that those funds are available. If you're struggling, well, I know virtually everyone's struggling right now. And also HB 340, which was a bill that was retooled in our post-adjournment session, our veto session, to help, mostly to help renters, but it also helps if you are renting out, if that's your small business, to help prevent you from getting foreclosed for a period of time. But as I think Senator Barker mentioned, a lot more help is on the way in the United States House of Representatives if the Senate will agree to it. And so, we in Virginia will mostly be helping as a pass-through for those federal funds.
Thank you. And then Senator Saslaw, same question, please.
Yeah, a lot of our energy at the state level has been in connecting people with the various federal programs. Now, your PPP or Paycheck Protection Program, the state of Virginia has gotten $12 billion of federal money for that. And for the second program, which is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, we've gotten almost $600 million. Now, this it was mentioned earlier by Delegate Herring. Delegate Jensen had a bill, the Small Business Emergency Grant Program for businesses that have less than 25 people. The Small Business Financing Authority is in the process of working out the final plans on that, and they hope to have that thing ready to go very shortly. Now, as mentioned by Delegate Levine, the House of Representatives passed a package that obviously is not going to be passed by the Senate, but hopefully they can work out something there that will help the small businesses that so desperately need this help. A lot of businesses aren't going to be able to reopen. They're because they had too much debt, and they've essentially decided there's no way they can overcome this. So we're going to have a problem there. Now, with respect to local governments, Alexandria is going to receive $13 million as a result of the second grant program from the federal government. Arlington County will get $20 million. Fairfax County, because they're over 500,000, got $200 million. So there are a lot of things that we're working on. One of the things that's important to remember is that the problems that you hear about here in Virginia, from administratively, are happening all over America. This country was not set up, nor is our state government set up, and we don't have a federal printing press like the federal government does, but not set up. There's no way to handle 36 million unemployed people. It is just simply overwhelmed our entire structure, both at the state and federal level. So that's going to still take some more time to smooth that out. I don't know if you noticed, speaking of testing, in the Washington Post today, they had 1,700 tests out in Loudoun County. There were almost 1,700 cars lined up bumper to bumper that consumed all those tests. And when people see that if they have to go through that, a lot of them are going to shy away from it. So, I mean, there's just so many administrative problems that we're not, set up to handle that we're going to have to adjust to. But we've got business relief programs on the way, and I think there'll be more to come.
Thank you, Senator. The Chamber has long been an advocate for modernization of Virginia's ABC laws, and the public health crisis has paved a path to some of that modernization. Do you all think that some of these loosened restrictions could become permanent once the health crisis is over? And would you be an advocate for such loosening of those restrictions? I'm going to start with Senator Eben, please.
Sure. I don't know how I got selected, but I'm happy to answer.
Sangria bill.
I know.
History.
Yeah, no, I've had a few of these alcohol bills before. Yeah, no, I think people are open to making regulations more reasonable for businesses. I think everyone on the call knows we've had kind of a convoluted and sometimes archaic ABC system. This session, we did change our licensing structure to streamline the number of licenses. And I don't know that we're going to, do a lot of piecemeal, but I think this is a time, I hate to call it an opportunity, but an opportunity to see if there are things that can be done to make it easier for business. And I think there is a willingness to consider what we can do to help ABC purveyors make their products more available without as much government red tape that's not necessary. So yes, is the short answer. We might be able to contract for sales through third-party delivery services and explore other ideas as well. I think my office has put my contact information up on the side of the chat box, so let us know if you have specifics on that later.
Thank you. Delegate Levine.
So this question actually plays into my pre-existing prejudices long before COVID, which is I am not in favor of the vast majority of alcohol regulation. It's amazing how much time we spend in the General Assembly on alcohol-related bills. It's sort of an inside joke. It seems like, I don't know, one out of every 10 bills is this relief for, I don't know, Buckingham's alcohol. It's all done very piecemeal, and it's kind of silly in my view. I think a lot of this archaic stuff dates back to Prohibition, and I'm not in favor of most of these regulations. So the fact that we're heading in that direction because of COVID, I'd like to see us take it and extend it. And, the 40% food rule, I mean, we have some really strange rules with regard to alcohol regulation. And, I think, obviously we got to stop drunk driving. But apart from that, apart from the retailing and the distributing and all those rules, never made much sense to me. So, I'm all for relaxing those restrictions.
Thank you, Senator Barker.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of things that are being tried now. They won't necessarily all become permanent, but there's no question but that some of them will. And so I think there will be some changes that will go into effect there. I think it's going to be done in a cautious manner to a certain extent in terms of what we do. We have been gradually over the last 12, 13 years that I've been in the legislature, gradually loosening up on some of the restrictions that have been there. But I think one of the things that we can say is that We've not had some of the problems with alcohol that some other states that have not had these types of restrictions have had. And we're going to be a little bit careful in how we handle it.
Thank you. Senator Sasla.
Well, I've got a different point of view. I've been there, as you know, since 1976. And I've been there through virtually all of the changes to the ABC law. I sponsored most of them myself. Now, you heard Delegate Levine mention the 40% food requirement. There is no 40% food requirement. The law on the books says 55% alcohol, 45% food. I put it there in 1980. 8 years later, I and Billy Robinson took beer and wine out of the equation. The effective ratio is 83-17. Beer and wine is not counted, okay? So if the only way that you're going to get around that, if you want to loosen that, is essentially to do away with all food requirement and just have open bars on all of the corners. When I put that bill in, the Alexandria delegation fought it. And one of the things that Wiley Mitchell, who was the state senator then, said, that we're not interested in having in Old Town and having bars on every corner. In other words, bars and no food. I agreed with that, okay? Now, like I said, with beer and wine not counted in the equation, we took that out in 88. The effective ratio is really 83-17. If you can't meet that, you're running a bar. If you can't meet that, you're running a bar. Now, we have a three-tiered system, okay? Goes from the manufacturer to the wholesaler to the retailer. That enables us to keep track of that. When Bob McDonnell got elected governor, one of the things he campaigned on was that he would privatize the ABC stores. Well, when Mark Warner was governor, he looked at that, but the state would lose in revenue $225 to $250 million a year. We can hardly afford that, and particularly right now. That system's worked pretty well. Can it be improved? I'm sure it can. But basically, if you're in favor of open bars, you know, and nothing else, no food requirements, then do away with the whole thing altogether. I'm not in favor of that. I think we've got a pretty good system, and I'm inclined to keep it. Sure, we can, make it a little more efficient from place to place, but as to essentially gut the whole three-tier system and the total food thing, I'm opposed to that.
Thank you. And Delegate Herring.
Thank you. And I will just say that I think it's going to be a heavy lift the way I see it. The restaurants were able to clear out their beer taps, and it was just, my understanding, it's an issue of they didn't want the restaurants to lose money on beer that was on tap, and allow them to clear it out and allow it to be delivered. My concern, and it just is why I say it's going to be a heavy lift with mixed drinks continuing to allow that. The question is what strength are that mixed drink, and what regulation. So perhaps maybe some things can be loosened, like Senator Barker said, but I do think it's going to be, unfortunately, I'm just saying the reality, I think it's going to be a heavy lift. I could be wrong, but there are a lot of questions about, public safety and, especially with mixed drinks of being allowed to leave restaurants, post-COVID. Hopefully we get there soon. But, and so that's just my opinion. It'll be a lift.
We appreciate that. I think, we've had to get creative for our small business owners, for our restaurant groups to have the volumes that they need to make their margins, and appreciate the efforts that have been pursued thus far to create some additional avenues to secure revenue for our restaurants. The next question is focused on this past legislative session. So this year's session had a record number of bills introduced. I know I had about 180 or so that I was tracking on a daily basis and bugging most of you probably far too often. But in your opinion, each of you, what do you think the most important thing that you all tackled this year, the most important items that you accomplished during this 2020 legislative session? And we'll start with Senator Barker.
Sure. There were a lot of things, and part of what made this session so remarkable was that we made major steps forward, I think, in an extraordinarily large number of categories. So there were a lot of different bills. We had far more bills than we'd ever had before, had far more bills passed than we'd ever had before. And I think, moving Virginia forward in a lot of respects. So you had everything from dealing with significant climate and environmental problems, to the Equal Rights Amendment, to gun safety issues, to a number of economic development initiatives, to things related to preschool education for children. So a lot of those types of things all got tackled. But I would say that to select one bill, and it's a little bit of a cheat to do it, but the one bill obviously would be the budget, because we did incorporate a lot of these positive steps that we took this year in the budget. And we did make major funding increases, and a significant increase in K-12 education, particularly focused on disadvantaged students. We made a huge additional funding commitment as it relates to pre-kindergarten services to children. And if we can get all pre-kindergartners ready for kindergarten, it will make a long-term difference in their lives and will radically improve things in Virginia. We also had a number of initiatives in water quality that we did this year with funding that will help improve the water around Virginia. We had a lot of things in health and human resources. We had an extraordinarily large number of initiatives there, one of which was getting an adult dental program for Medicaid recipients, which was a significant thing, because it used to be they had these programs weekends down in Southwest Virginia where everybody would come in and get their medical care once a year, and dental care and vision and everything. Now that we have Medicaid expansion, nobody comes for the medical care. They're all there for dental care. And a lot of them are individuals who are, in effect, have some major issues with dental care. Dental care is not only significant for their oral health, but it's significant for their overall health. It has a major interaction with hypertension and a whole host of other conditions that people have. So we did a lot of things in the budget that were very positive. I just hope when we get back in August, we'll have the resources to be able to unfreeze a lot of that funding so that we can follow through on the commitments we made when we had the revenues in the hand.
Thank you. Delegate Herring.
I have to agree with George, but he already took that one. So I will take this opportunity to talk about the energy reform bills. We had the Clean Economy Act, which passed, which hopefully will contribute to job creation and renewable energies. And then I also had the bill, my bill actually, the RGGI bill, cap and trade bill to reduce carbon emissions and create jobs. And we are now, Virginia's not the outlier and has joined other states within this Atlantic region to create jobs and especially deal with the flooding issues that are happening on our East Coast. But I will say that the RGGI initiative has been able to create at least 45,000 jobs in the region, in the Atlantic region. It has significant benefits with health and reducing health costs, as well as economic value. And I think that those energy pieces of legislation will spur hopefully job creation in the state, which is going to certainly be needed.
Senator Saslaw.
Yeah, there were quite a few, and you've heard the budget obviously is the biggest, but the Virginia Clean Economy Act, one of the reasons a lot of people worked on that, the final product was signed off by all of the interested parties. Nobody got 100% of what they wanted, but everybody probably got 75 to 80%. It'll call for us to be essentially carbon-free by around 2040, 2045, and totally on renewables 2045 to 2050. Now, if a utility is unable to meet that, they can what they can do is what's called buy clean energy credits, and there'll be times when you may have to. There'll be times, I got a nice picture of George Barker on my screen, but there will be times when nuclear energy will have to fill in because we don't have enough sun or enough wind. But when that happens, that's when they're going to have to, buy the energy credits. Gun sense legislation finally passed. And, you see the president on always tweeting out that Virginia's taking away everybody's guns. The bills that we passed are on the books in as much as 37 other states have passed laws similar to what we did. And with also, I and Eileen Phillicorn, Speaker Phillicorn, had a transportation bill that is going to pump $30 million more into Northern Virginia's pot, okay? The transient occupancy tax, which will go up just 1%, $1 more per 100, will take effect next May 1st. We've also have changed the way we calculate with respect to the gasoline tax. We're going to add to that 5 cents more on recordation fees. And I want to compliment the Northern Virginia realtors who supported that. On a sale of real estate, it'll add on a $500,000 sale, $250 more. But between that and the transient occupancy tax, we're looking at $30 million more up here. Also, Women's Reproductive Freedom Act. We've wiped a lot of repressive bills off of the books, which should have never been there to begin with. No excuse absentee voting also passed. We got a lot done, and also banned discrimination across a lot of areas, and particularly, and Senator Evan can talk about this, the Virginia Values Act is a very, very good piece, a strong piece of legislation. So we got, I would say in all the years that I've been there, this has been probably the most productive session in all of my time in the General Assembly, which is roughly the equivalent of the other four combined. Quit laughing, Barker.
Thank you, Senator Sasla. Delegate Levine.
Well, it is extremely difficult to encapsulate this session in one. I think you asked for one item, forget that. I mean, there were so many revolutionary things we did this year, all of which would have been huge news if done by themselves. And yet, I mean, we were the 38th state to pass the Equal Rights Amendment, and that's like a footnote. What we did with guns is absolutely revolutionary in Virginia. State they thought that never see things, basic things, important things, background checks, extreme risk protective orders, lost and stolen gun reporting, keeping guns away from children. In Alexandria, I love the part that gives local control, so we don't have these goons ruining our farmers markets with their, assault weapons coming in from Hopewell. When it comes to the minimum wage, was a dramatic increase. Well, years and years we were behind West Virginia. That going up, criminal justice reform. We did a number of things there. My body cameras bill finally passed after all these years. Discrimination, not just Equal Rights Amendment, my comprehensive LGBT non-discrimination bill, which adds sexual orientation, gender identity throughout the code of Virginia, and some 60 odd places passes along with the Values Act, which strengthen protections in employment non-discrimination that I know Senator Evans is going to talk about. They mentioned the environment. That was huge. Voting was huge. We did more with voting than has probably been done in Virginia in 30 or 50 years, with no excuse voting, with making Election Day a state holiday instead of Jefferson Jackson, Davis Jackson, Lee Jack, whatever. It's history. We don't need to worry about that anymore. On the monuments, I had an animal tethering bill that had struggled to get through that got through this year. Changes in, it's so hard. Each of these things would be huge in any session. Decriminalization of marijuana wasn't even mentioned. That was Delegate Herring's bill. We have done a lot in a wide variety. And again, if any one of these things were done alone, they'd be the highlight of the session. But the minority leader, Todd Gilbert, said that it will take decades to undo all we've done, and I personally took that as a compliment.
Well done. And then finally, Senator Evan.
Thank you.
And first, I got to thank you for having us here today. I really appreciate it. My colleagues have given a sense of the bills that have passed, but as you can get a sense from what they've said, it's been a sweeping array of change. It's hard to overstate, as Delegate Levine said, how much was accomplished in one legislative session, in my opinion, and in those of my colleagues, to move Virginia forward into a forward-thinking state that continues to attract, or will continue to attract, more employees of the future for you all and for our economy. I would say that Senator Barker didn't give himself any credit for his extreme risk protection order bill, which is part of quite a number of gun safety bills that we passed. I co-chair our gun violence protection caucus, and I think that one of the most important pieces of legislation in that arena that passed was his bill that says that if someone is shown to be a imminent threat to themselves or others, that there's a mechanism, a safety valve, where weapons can be removed from their possession. There's that, as well as a universal background check for sale or transfer of firearms, and one handgun. Voting, as was said, no excuse absentee voting. I did work on marijuana decriminalization for the last 5 years, and was happy with Delegate Herring handling it in the House and leading the effort there to bring that over the finish line. Lastly, though, I do want to just touch base on the Virginia Values Act. That is I think it's the most comprehensive civil rights bill that we've had in Virginia history, dealing not just with LGBT people, but with people of different nationalities, races, genders, array of personal characteristics that have nothing to do with their ability to either have housing, have public accommodations, or a job, and to say that they won't be discriminated against. And I think, I know Josh is on the call from the Northern Virginia Realtors, wanted to thank him for his role, his organization's role in that. And also, it was really helpful to have so many large businesses. We had more than 30 of the largest businesses in Virginia endorse the bill, including AT&T and so many others that really helped make it clear that the bill was a mainstream piece of legislation and bring it across the finish line. So thank you for that. The one interesting part of that bill is public accommodations. We were one of only 4 states in the country without a public accommodations law, and notably, those states were all formerly segregated states, and now people will not be able to deny, refuse service to people for irrelevant reasons. So, and I think it was a big session. Senator Barker's right, the budget's important, but these are the bills that will be, I think, there for all time. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. So the last question from me is, parts of the Commonwealth entered phase 1 of reopening last week. What is the sense, how's that going from your positions? What have you heard your colleagues in other parts of the state share? And do you think Northern Virginia is going to be ready by the 29th? I'm going to start with Delegate Levine. I know testing, but love to hear your feedback.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Ann and Joe, and the whole chamber for doing this. Just as my last sort of official time to speak. Y'all do a terrific job every year. I will miss the food. I'll have to make some of my own, but really appreciate your working with us and say that, listen, my office, like all of ours, is always open. We've had a lot of small business owners. More people have contacted us for constituent services in the last month than probably in the last year before. So I want to encourage people to do that. We can help. I have a whole page on my website. We affectionately call it the Corona page, where you can click and get not just state resources, but local and federal links. So encourage everyone at the chamber who's working so hard to save their businesses in these really hard times to reach out, and we're going to do what we can. And if it's not a state issue, we'll try to put you in touch with the proper person at the local or federal level. Now, to answer your question, I think people are nervous. to be honest. I would say for every one, and I've got, again, got like a lot of constituent email over the past month. For every one person who wants to open up, I would say we get 5 or 6 that are very nervous about it. People complaining, hey, I went to this store and there are no masks there. What do I do about it? Hey, I'm in my 80s, or my parents are, or grandparents are, and I'm afraid of catching it. And I have to work at this business, but they're not giving us protection. What do I do about it? Who do I complain to? People are nervous, at least in Northern Virginia, I think. It may be different in other areas of the Commonwealth. But like I said, 5 to 1. So I don't know if we're going to be ready or not. I really think we have to give people confidence. And to me, that confidence, it goes back to testing, right? It goes at all levels of government. We have to make sure that we as the Commonwealth of Virginia are letting our Virginians know that we are checking everyone we can, contact tracing, quarantining those that have the disease. We do have enough equipment now, it seems. PPE testing, that was a big problem a month ago. It's not a problem as much today. And I think businesses, again, have to give confidence to people. Signs outside your stores. We disinfect our counters hourly or whatever, or after every customer. We are restricting the number of people that come in. We are requiring masks. I think to get people to patronize your businesses again, put it up on your website. Let people know what you are doing to protect them, and they will come back. People are anxious to come back. I live in Old Town, and I walk down the river a lot. That's my sort of exercise. And I see a lot of people outside, but mostly, and I'm very proud of Alexandria for this, mostly socially distant. They might be with their family, but there's not a lot of massive groups congregating, even along the riverfront. Even, I'm very careful to stay 6 feet away from folks. I think most people are getting it right. They are doing it. A lot of people are wearing masks. So I think we're getting there, but the more we can do to inspire confidence, both the government level and the business level, the more people will be ready to reopen.
Thank you, Delegate Levine. And I think I know for our members generally, the Alexandria Health Department has now instituted, we're moving forward with a ALX promise metric for disinfection, encouraging folks to come into local business and with a sign on the external property of a business, just to give people peace of mind. So our Alexandria Health Department has really worked quickly to make sure that they've made strides to give folks that confidence that that you spoke of, Delegate Levine. Delegate Herring, same question.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. I think we just, and then I will say just observations. I agree with Delegate Levine that for the most part, Alexandrians are being careful and trying to be safe. But I am concerned, and it has been expressed that we move too quickly with safety precautions in place. And I'll give you an example, which I found interesting, is that at Virginia Beach, if you look at the newspaper, the beach was crowded, but the beach was not officially open. Mm-hmm. And the following subsequent Monday, the governor announced a plan for opening the beach. And I read reports that stores were packed, people with no masks on. And I think the biggest concern I'm hearing in other jurisdictions is that we'll get a spike because we're moving too quickly without precautions. It does not mean that businesses should not open, but we have to be careful and still have that caution because numbers could possibly spike. Hopefully they won't, but that's the biggest concern. And I know the other thing you asked if I heard concerns is certainly, you all probably know Prince William County. It was reported this morning that they have tried for an effort to basically start opening their restaurants. They want their restaurants to open at least with outdoor seating and not waiting until the end of May. I think that's the biggest concern, moving too fast without proper precautions. And everyone loves the sun and to be on the beach, but we've got to, I think, still protect against spikes.
Absolutely. Thank you. Senator Sasla.
Well, I think we definitely by a week from Friday, we'll be ready for phase 1. We're not ready to go beyond phase 1 yet. We still have, a ways to go. but phase one is kind of is just slightly more than what we're doing now. The change that I would make, very few restaurants have outside seating. And what they might do in phase one is allow 25% of your seating capacity. Most restaurants could easily socially distance. And before we went beyond that, restaurants would have to show and prove that they are maintaining social distance, their employees are wearing masks. We got to build public confidence, and we have to do the right thing. With respect to the opening, it's been mentioned at Virginia Beach, really didn't have much choice. From Broward County to the Virginia-North Carolina line, Broward County, Florida, all the beaches were open. And then north of us, Maryland, opened theirs. We may not be ready for phase two, but I think by a week from today, a week from Friday, I think we're ready to start phase one, which really isn't a major reopening, but it moves us in the direction, and it will give some businesses a chance to show that they can do the right thing. I think that's important. And we, as Delegate Levine said, we need to get testing up and contact tracing. I think these will come, but sooner or later, we've got to start moving the economy a little.
Senator Eben, same question.
Sure. Well, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to reopen, but it's important to recognize that the virus has a 14-day incubation period, and it's been less than 7 days since that first reopening in Virginia. So we don't really have enough data yet if we want to base it on data, which is what things need to be based on. But I'm hopeful. Now, the constituents, as Delegate Levine's are, and we share the constituents, many of them are asking for tighter restrictions and enforcement, with just much fewer asking for fewer restrictions. The thing that we're hearing a lot about is about people wanting to get their hair cut. You know, people have their own, so if you have someone with a salon, they're in better shape, I guess. But I will say that one of the things that's going to help us once we do reopen it and before is contact tracers. We need about 15 tracers per every 100,000 people. We've got a good number of applicants for the 1,000 slots we had allocated. And with the slots being done in Alexandria, I'm sorry, not slots, with the tests to be done in Alexandria on May 25th, we'll be in a position to see how we're doing too. I'm concerned about really your workforce, the public, of course, but the workforce too, because we need a healthy workforce. So I'm hopeful we'll be able to reopen. Data is trending better. We'll continue to watch it, and we'll continue to let the data guide the decision. Although I think with the region of Maryland and DC, that we're likely to be not moving perhaps entirely on our own.
Thank you. And finally, we'll pose the same question to Senator Barker.
Yeah, I think that, there are certainly opportunities here. Whether we're going to be ready by the 29th of May, I'm not sure yet. We are, it's only been, less than a week so far with what's happened in other parts of Virginia. It's us, Richmond and Wayne County on the Eastern Shore that have not opened yet. Unfortunately, we're still seeing a high number of new cases and seeing a significant percentage of the deaths in Virginia. As I said earlier, we're less than a third of the entire state's population, but we're 2/3 of the coronavirus cases and deaths that are occurring. And we need to make sure that we do this in a way that's consistent with what's happening with hopefully a decrease in the number of new cases.
Thank you. Thank you all for those very thoughtful responses to our questions. I know Maria has been fielding some questions from our membership. So I'm going to turn it over to Maria for the next few minutes so that we can get some feedback from our audience.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks again for being here. So we're now going to do audience questions. Some were sent to me in advance. Others are being placed in the chat section on this call. To answer this, we'll allow our elected officials to sort of jump in as you see fit in answering it. We won't sort of script you as we did with some of the other questions. So to begin, a question I received in advance is, how do you think things will change down in Richmond in the first post-coronavirus General Assembly session in 2021? Packed meeting rooms, packed hallways, packed offices. Can this continue to be the norm in post-COVID-19 world? Or could things change? How could it change? How could it change how you do your job? How could it change how advocates and those visiting Richmond to speak with all of you do their jobs?
Well, first of all, I would say that our next session is not 2021. Our next session is this summer. We are going to have a special session. It hasn't been called yet, but the governor's made very clear that once they figure out what's going on with budget and revenues, we will have a session. You know, whether it's August, September remains to be seen. And that one may well be held virtually. The Speaker of the House, Eileen Fillicorn, has made very clear, at least with regard to the House. I think the Senate will probably meet in person, but the House, we have 100 members, and we did it under a tent last time. And although that was doable, it was certainly, there were technical problems. It would be a lot easier to do it virtually. So that I think will happen this summer. As regards to 2021, I hope and pray to God we'll have a vaccine by then. I have no idea. Obviously, no one does. If we don't, we're going to have to do a lot more virtual things. Now, in this internet age, no one, for example, we get almost no letters anymore. When I worked in Congress 15 years ago, we got most of our stuff by mail and less by email. That's completely changed. Everything's email now, and that happened before COVID. So, be a lot more phone calls, a lot more virtual meetings. But again, I hope and pray that we can be out of this by the 2021 session. But let's not forget, we have a very important session coming up this summer.
Hello. It's Dick Zaslaw. As Delegate Levine pointed out, we're going to have a session this summer, probably sometime in August, maybe as late as early September. I, for one, would prefer for us to go back to Richmond. The Senate has a room, and it's on hold for us, where we met on April 22nd, where we were, most of us were 15 feet apart. The House met outside in a tent. I'm not sure that, they want to do that in the summer or in the winter, but I think things would move a lot smoother if we could use the facilities that the state has or has access to, rather than try to do everything. 100 people on the phone trying to debate a bill is not going to be the easiest thing to do. But obviously, we've got to keep safety in mind, and hopefully, by 2021, they will develop a vaccine that will solve a lot of problems. I've told people where's Jonas Salk and Albert Sabin when we need them. And for you youngins who are on the phone, those are the guys that were involved with the polio vaccines. But I'm hopeful that we can gradually begin to get things normal by the time 2021 rolls around.
Anyone else want to take that question? We all good?
We're all good.
Great, thank you. All right, the next question is, will there be any specific help for nonprofits? So we've heard a lot about small businesses getting some grant money, but not anything, specifically geared toward nonprofits. So someone is asking if you see if there will be any help toward them.
Yeah, I guess I could start with that, and maybe one of my colleagues on the Finance Committee can chime in and correct me or add on if they'd like to. The state does not provide direct appropriations to non-state agencies just for the fact that they're a non-state agency. There are, however, in the past, what we've done is we've let people contract for services with the state, and that could be a possibility through the appropriations process. But nothing different for nonprofits than we would do for a private company, and we, in that regard.
Well, this is Senator Barker. I'll just jump in quickly on this. There are some federal monies that are already being targeted to some extent to some of the nonprofits that have been provided to different organizations that are doing them on a grant basis. So you have to apply for them and be able to have the best application or one that's most consistent with the purpose of the funds to be able to get the monies. And there may be some further expansions of those types of things there for some of the nonprofits. We've clearly seen a lot of businesses themselves help contribute to a lot of the nonprofits, both nationally as well as locally, because a lot of the nonprofits have a significant increase in numbers of people who are needing their services and resources. And so hopefully we'll be able to continue that and provide the resources that people who have lost their jobs and are struggling economically that address their needs.
Great, thank you. Our next question is detailed, so bear with me as I read it to all of you. It says, on the local level, we've been working really hard to use the CARES money allocated to the city to tackle our greatest needs, such as providing food and shelter to our residents and helping our small businesses through a grant program we are launching very soon. Earlier this week, Secretary Lane noted that disbursement of the second half of the local allocations won't happen until later this summer with the General Assembly's input/approval. While the first tranche was allocated based on population, it's been suggested that the second allocation might be based on impact or number of cases. Senator Barker mentioned that by population would be beneficial to the city. How are you all thinking about this, and how do you think your General Assembly colleagues will be thinking about this?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Charnel.
And I'll just be brief. I mean, certainly we want to provide the city of Alexandria as much resources as they need. I think that what we're going to face is also a concern about underserved populations and those localities, like you said, who will have a greater impact with the virus. And just I go back to the principle that we're a commonwealth, and I think that's going to be the challenge, is balancing the entire needs of the state in allocating resources. Because arguably, if some areas are doing well, it may be more appropriate to send the money to another locality. So that's all I have.
All right, well, I'll jump in here. I mean, obviously, I think one of the options that was referenced there with the question was providing the money based upon the severity of the outbreak and the number of cases in each of the jurisdictions around the Commonwealth. And that would seem to be a pretty fair way to do it, and that it's the areas where you've had the most significant economic impact and where you've had the most significant public health impact. And if we could combine looking at those two, I think that would work very well for making sure that the monies get targeted to where they're needed the most.
One of the things to remember is that anytime funds are distributed on a population basis, Northern Virginia obviously comes out the winner. Anytime the money is distributed on a formula basis, we lose, regardless of what it is. So, but you do have to take into consideration, as pointed out, where are all the problems? Well, as was pointed out for almost immediately after we started today, more than 50% of the cases are in Northern Virginia, which is 29–30% of the state's population. So it would stand to reason that we would wind up getting the bulk of the money. If it's distributed formula-wise, we probably are not going to do very well. But I would think that looking at where all the problems are is where you need to put your resources.
I was going to say something similar. Whether you look at population or caseload, we would get the bulk of the funds. Alexandria has the ignominious distinction of having the highest cases per thousand of any jurisdiction in Northern Virginia. If you look at the list of the 133 Virginia localities, BPAP has a layout of those that have greater than 500 cases per thousand. We're at 900 something. Actually, Arlington and Fairfax are at 800 something, and we're 5th or 6th worst, we Alexandria, in Commonwealth. So it's bad here. I mean, let's be blunt. It's bad here. That means that if we do it by caseload, we'll probably get more money than even by population because we need it. And we particularly need it in communities like the one I mentioned, like Chiricahua, communities where we have low-income essential workers who live in close quarters and are at most at risk. As I said, the zip code where you find Alexandria, Chiricahua, had 55% positive testing rate. It's one of the reasons why I was pressing VDH to do what they're doing on Monday, which is to put testing right in the heart of that neighborhood at the Cora Kelly School. So we have high caseload here. Let's be blunt, and we could use the funds.
Great, thank you. We've got time for one more question, and that is, you mentioned that we have seen fewer job losses than other states and even other parts of our Commonwealth. Why is that? How do we keep this success?
I think it's basically a combination of a couple of things. One is that our economy's been strong. We went into this with about a 2.5% unemployment rate, which is extraordinarily low and was one of the lowest in the country. So we had a strong economy to build to, so that it helped protect us from huge job losses. The other thing is that the composition of employers and where the jobs are in Virginia, we have a lot of federal employees, and basically they're not being laid off now. We have a lot of military members in different places around Virginia. They're not being laid off now. We have a very strong tech industry in Northern Virginia, and there are certainly not a lot of job losses in that field right now. So and also we have a significant number of large companies, and the information that we got on Tuesday at the Finance Committee meeting showed that there was very little layoff from any of the large companies in Virginia. Most of them are, even if they don't have enough work for everybody, they're keeping everybody on the payroll because they want to have them there when the work picks up again.
Well, with that, I think we've reached the end of our time. So let me just do a quick thank you to all of our members of our delegation. Really appreciate you all spending some time with us this morning. And know that you are ready to get back to work and keep moving Virginia forward. So again, thank you all for spending some time with us. On behalf of the Board of Directors, thank all our members who also participated, and we look forward to seeing you all soon and hearing more from what you are doing in Richmond come August.
Thank you. Thank the Chamber.
Yeah.
Thank you all.